How's everybody doing? Darth Vader's here. It's big. I have friends with me today. This is Marcus. You guys know Marcus? Big Marcus fans in the room. I was thinking, any of you ever learned how to play a musical instrument? Marcus learned, actually what's impressive is just this past week, Marcus picked up a guitar for the first time. He's a quick study, but I'm just kidding. We're going to unmute Marcus, and he's going to, Marcus, what was it? You teach guitar lessons sometimes?
Sometimes.
Yeah, what does it sound like when a new person is learning guitar?
It's kind of like
Smoke on the water, right? A little slow, yeah, right, yeah, but you nail it. And any parent of a kid who's ever learned guitar is like, oh man, why is that the most recognizable riff? But then over time, you slowly get better, and your goal is that you can play something, nice. That was my whole, really there's no point to this. I was just like, I want Marcus to play some tasty licks, and so let's make that happen. But then you would hope that where you can play something maybe where you can begin to play with others, so something that you would be doing on this morning. What key are you in right now?
C.
You're in C. This is going to be important. So start playing something fun. Or nice, or, yeah. It's beautiful. So music for me is an escape. This is one of those things where when I'm having a bad day, I can get in the car and just turn on music. I turn on music. Sometimes I just have Marcus read with me, and I'm just like, you just play for me, bud. No, you play like that, and it's just, the music is beautiful, but then over time, as you're playing and you're playing that, you learn how to play with someone else. And so then Marcus plays, and Shelby learns to play along with him, so you guys show us some of that. And two people playing together towards the same end becomes something really, really beautiful. And you can get lost in it, and it's just, and this is part of what our worship team does on a weekly basis, is you start playing something, everybody else fills in around it, and the idea is that all of us working together to make beautiful music towards one end can become something that is glorifying, that creates emotion, that helps us connect with the Lord, and then over time, other people will want to join in. And so I couldn't get Bill to join us, but you get somebody maybe who wants to play on the drums, and so you have this beautiful music playing, and you're lost in it, and and then at just the right time, and just give it a sec. Thank you guys. Shelby and Marcus, everything in their musical being was like, has the ability to take something beautiful and make it ugly. The Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians, not chapter 1, chapter 12, says, if I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but I do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and I can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but don't have love, then I'm nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. And so the image that came to my mind, the reason why we did this is because as we unpack that, this seems to be reinforcing Jesus' repeated explanation of the most important thing in Scripture. When Jesus was regularly pressed about, teacher, tell us what matters most. What are the most important things in the law? Jesus would over and over and over again remind us. Do you know what are the two things? Right. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor yourself. Love God, love people. This was the resounding message that Jesus instructed, love God. And as Jesus was teaching it, one of the groups that he had to fight against the most was this group called the Pharisees. And I tend to think that we think the Pharisees are some sort of really special thing that we have eradicated from our culture. Let me try to make it clear for you. The people that Jesus had the hardest time convincing of this truth was church-going folk. Was people who showed up at church every Sunday and sat and they listened and they learned and they made what was supposed to be this beautiful symphony of love. into this resounding gong and the clash of a cymbal because of their desire to make it something that we could manipulate or control by behavior. And so this is what Jesus was working in. This is what Paul seems to be reminding us again. But what's interesting is not just that Paul would reemphasize this theme, that we sort of expect, that Paul would reemphasize the teaching of Jesus and the right way to a connection with God. What makes this interesting are the things that Paul takes shot at in creating the juxtaposition or in creating the contrast. Paul says, listen, if I can do these really impressive spiritual things, the list, listen, if I can speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I don't love people, then I'm worthless. And Paul says, if I have this gift of prophecy, you know what the gift of prophecy is? If I have this gift to speak with the voice of God with authority, that I can channel the Lord speaking through me to the benefit of other people, yet it's not motivated by a deep love for God and a deep commitment to love people, then I'm messing up the music. Paul says, if I got faith so incredibly deep that I can literally move mountains, and listen, this can be literal mountains because God can do everything, but even figurative, that I can come against these mountains that the enemy sets up in my path through faith. If I can do amazing works of faith, but it is not moved by love, his exact words, then I'm nothing. Even if I give everything I have to the poor. You remember the rich young ruler in Jesus' time when Jesus goes, listen, you've been doing all of these things right, but there's one thing you lack. Take all you have, sell, give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. Paul says, even this, if it's not motivated for the right reasons, if it's not saturated in a love for God and driven by a love for his people, then it's nothing. And so I think it's interesting that Paul is taking shots at what then and now many people think make a person mature. Because I think even today we tend to evaluate, if I were to have opened this message with a question, what does it look like for somebody to be spiritually mature? We would say things like has daily Bible reading time. We would say things like prays all the time. We would say things like is at church regularly, goes on missions trips and serves. And hear me, these are good things. However, it is possible to do the good things from a wrong heart and miss the point of the gospel. The idea that gospel is not that we learn to, from an angry, calcified heart, to do things that God has deemed good. But that through relationship with God, we are so transformed by grace that the only response is to return love in the same way that we have been extended love. This was a big part of Jesus's ministry and mission. And Matthew 23 says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you're hypocrites. You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. Jesus is telling these Pharisees, listen, you guys think you're good because you do spiritual things. You make sure that everybody sees you. Put your tithe envelope in the tithe box on the way out of the sanctuary. You make sure that people know what your giving record is. You make sure that you walk in and you're not carrying like the thin line Bible. No, dude, you're bringing like the life application study Bible with years of church bulletins stuffed in that bad boy. You want people to know who you are, and yet you leave and there's no evidence of a transforming love in anything that you do. Jesus says, woe to you. Like, in other words, be afraid. Be very, very afraid. To paraphrase, Jesus says, you should have loved. You should have recognized that behavior is not, empty behavior is not a sign of maturity, that love is actually a sign of maturity. And so we continue our journey through the emotionally healthy discipleship this morning. This is what we're going to talk about, is reframing the idea of spiritual maturity. And what I hope that we'll understand is that when we talk about what does it look like to be spiritually mature, that honest to goodness, it all boils down to this. Love and love alone is the measure of spiritual maturity. Our capacity to love God and love those made in his image is the mark of spiritual maturity. It's easy today to fall back into habits similar to what the Pharisees do to judge our spiritual maturity by the wrong things. But if I had to give you a definition, maturity is simply the external proof of healthy internal growth and development. You think about that physically, right? When a child goes to the doctor and a doctor is making an immediate or at least an initial determination of is this child healthy or is this child not healthy, they look at outward signs. They can tell by the rate of growth of the body. They can tell by all of the different sizes and vitals, these external signs, whether things appear to be healthy under the surface. And when things do not appear healthy under the surface, then they will go, well, even though this kid smiles a lot, even though this baby, we're worried that they may not actually be healthy, and so we're going to run some more tests. And so what I want us to recognize is spiritual maturity is simply the external evidence that the right things are happening inside. And so that's what we're talking about today. It's not about books I read. It's not about the number of weeks I attend, the things I do, what I give money to. These can become the proof of what we look for, but it's possible to have all of those things and not be mature. Matthew 22 says, "This is the great and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." The first one was you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And on these two commandments depend all of the law and all of the prophets. Here's what Jesus says. You guys are hung up on following the law outlined in what we would call Deuteronomy and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. You guys are hung up on following this code of behavior. But what Jesus was telling the Pharisees is you've missed the heart behind the law. The law was given to rescue the heart and to free it up to love. And so this is the invitation towards it. So as we wrap up our series today, it is fitting to end with this reminder about what God is after and trying to produce in us. And as we continue our journey together as a church this year where we say we're going to pursue health, I think it's especially interesting and important that we understand that love is the true measure of spiritual maturity. And so I want to do something with the rest of our time today. We're gonna unpack in a couple of ways what it looks like to put love into action and to allow love to lead us on this journey. And then at the end, we're going to create a few moments for you to have a personal, private, quiet response to that. And so that's how we're going to shepherd the rest of our time. As we're doing that, we're going to learn to recognize that maturity is just an external display of the health of inward growth. So my ability to love others in a couple of key ways is going to be the sign that I'm growing towards Christ. But make no mistake, this is maybe the most important understanding that we can settle in our minds. I want to take us to the passage of Isaiah. I got to be honest, anytime I'm praying and I'm like, Lord, where do you want me to read? And the Lord puts like a prophet on my mind, I'm like, oh man, I'm about to get in trouble. And so the Lord took me to Isaiah this week, and that's what I've been reading through, and I've not been able to get out of chapter 1 because it is just kind of a punch in the soul when you realize where I'm at in light of where I want to be. But here's what the Lord says through Isaiah. The Lord says, "What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I've had enough of burnt offerings, of rams, and the fat of well-fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of goats. Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They become a burden to me. I'm weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, in other words, when you pray, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen because your hands are full of blood. So wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause." It's Christianity in a nutshell, folks. And here's the thing. We don't really do new moon celebrations or Sabbath festivals, and so let me bring it into 2022 for us, okay? God mentions through Isaiah things like convocations and festivals and feasts of tabernacles. And the reason why he draws our attention to those is because those are things explicitly instructed for the nation of Israel in those books of the law that God ordained. And here's what God is saying. If you do the things that I've prescribed from a selfish, sinful, unsurrendered, unloving heart, you're not accomplishing anything, and you're kind of making me sick. And so Jesus says to us in 2022, he's like, listen, you're raising your hands in worship and then going out and being ugly with everybody you meet on the street. I'm tired of it. Jesus says your willingness to serve in children's ministry, but then the way that you conduct yourself on social media, it's not accomplishing you anything. Jesus says the way you divide over things that don't matter, but then you show up at church and smile and shake hands like you've got it all together, I'm not even hearing you in that. And so then we would cry out, well, Lord, but then what do I do? And his command to us would be the same. Do justice. Relieve oppression. Stand with the overlooked. Care for the marginalized. Love, right? So we're going to talk about that in a couple of contexts. You guys know that I was just in Haiti. And I was so moved by my time there and the Haitian people. But more than that, I was so moved by the heart and the structure and the vision of the ministry that I went to support. And I want you guys to get a taste of that. But I thought that even as moved as I was, I would be a really poor ambassador of that message. And so I have a really good friend. Our sons play football together, and we have Bible study together on Thursday mornings, which is mainly eating delicious food with a third guy and talking about how good God is. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine named Joe Rogelski. Joe is the founder and director of Upstream International. Yeah, you can applaud for Joe. Joe was also a pastor of a church in La Crosse, Wisconsin, before leaving. And so I just asked Joe to share with us the vision and the mission of Upstream, what they're doing, but then also what it might look like one particular way or a couple of particular ways for Compass to go, man, we're gonna step into love by standing with Upstream.